Okay, so we are at the very beginning of the fourth part of the Sefer Derech Hashem, which is the final part of the Sefer. And this is perhaps the most relevant on a day-to-day basis as far as the Sefer is concerned, because here he takes all the ideas that he's taught us so far and he puts them in, he adds them in to explain each of the daily mitzvahs. So the very beginning of Chelek Daled, Parak Aleph, that's what we did last week. It was a very, very short chapter, but very concise, very succinct in terms of the foundation that he establishes in that chapter. And that is that the Derech Hashem, the Ramchal, explains that all mitzvahs can be divided into two general categories. There's mitzvahs of study, there's mitzvahs of action. And then the Ramchal went on to explain that mitzvahs of action, can be divided into four categories. There's some mitzvahs which are constant, like loving God and fearing God. There's some mitzvahs that are daily, like donning tefillin. There are some mitzvahs that are from time to time, like the mitzvahs of Shabbos and Yom Tov. And then there are some mitzvahs that depend on the circumstances. Something needs to happen, like a person builds a new house and they need to put a fence around the roof, or putting up mezuzos, or different things of that sort. So now we are up to part 4, chapter 2. Oh, and he reiterated the point in the end of chapter 1, very, very, very significant, that these mitzvos are the vehicles through which we can cling to Hashem, we can come close to Hashem, which the Ramchal explained is really the purpose of it all, the purpose of the entire creation, as he laid out in the beginning of the Sefer. Okay, so now we are up to chapter 2, which is entitled Talmud Torah, Torah study. And here the Ramchal explains, Hine, Talmud HaTorah hu inyan mukhrach. Talmud Torah is something mukhrach, it's something that needs to be. Because without that, without Talmud Torah, one cannot possibly come to do any actions. Meaning, if you don't study and if you don't know the Torah, then there's no way for you to know what Hashem expects you to do. If you don't know what you're commanded to do, how are you supposed to do it? Aside from all this, so in addition to the very, very simple, very practical point that Torah study is necessary to know what we need to do, as far as mitzvahs are concerned, there's a whole nother aspect, a taflis gadol, relevant to the completion of man. Kfar Yiskarnu, we've already mentioned inyan b'ktsara Chelek Rishon. We've mentioned it in brevity in Chelek Rishon, Perek Revi'i. But now I'm going to go in greater length. So this is an idea that he touched on in the beginning of the Sefer, but now he's going to explain it in depth. So we're talking about the qualities of Talmud Torah. Why is Torah study so critical? Included in all of the influence that Hashem offers to his creations, what's needed by his creations, there's one particular hashpah, one flow, one influence, which is above and beyond all the others. Its purpose, its concept is, exceptionally valuable, and it's loftier than everything that exists. That is, okay, that was a very wordy line. What the Ramchal here is writing is, this is the ultimate expression, to the greatest degree which is possible in this world, to have a glimpse of what Hashem really is, what his real preciousness and real loftiness is all about. And it is a piece of Hashem himself. It's something that Hashem himself offered from his own honor and his own greatness to his creations. V'amnam kasher habori yisbarach shmo es hashpa'aso zos be'inyan nivra mimenu yisbarach l'tachla zevu Torah. Hashem bound up this hashpah, this flow, this influence, this energy in a creation which was created for this purpose, and that is the Torah itself. And this idea is completed in two ways: through labor and through understanding. No, excuse me. Higayon, they want to translate as speech, through speaking and through understanding. Okay, again, so just to sum up what we've said so far, the Ramchal is telling us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a desire to give access to the highest levels of Hashem's divine influence, Hashem's divine presence, of being able to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's honor and glory and beauty in its true sense. And what he created to embody this was the Torah. This is what we've explained there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu composed words and statements, which are the 5 books of the Torah. And after them, we have, to lesser degrees and different levels, Nevi'im Uksuvim, the other sections of Tanakh, of the Nevi'im, of the prophets, and of the Ksuvim, the writings. And he bound to them this divine influence, this divine energy, but often in such a way, when you speak these words, that hashpah, that influence, that energy is drawn down to the one who speaks them. This is with the condition, so here's an interesting statement. This is on the condition that the speech is being done according to the boundaries, the limits that have been set. As we've explained previously. And also the understanding of these words in their true sense. It will draw down this energy, this influence to the one who contemplates them. So this is a very fascinating idea. I just want to see if there's an idea, if there's some hint to what he means by reading the words according to the bigvulim shehugbu lo. Oh, he's going to discuss it shortly. Excuse me, it's coming up. It's not something that he wrote earlier in the Sefer. It's something that he's going to write soon. Okay, so very simply put, there's 2 elements to Torah study. That's speaking the words, and that's contemplating the concepts. And if you do it right, if you speak the words the way that they are meant to be spoken, and if you contemplate in a true sense, where you're really trying to understand the truth of the Torah, those 2 exercises, which are commonly referred to as Talmud Torah, studying Torah, that's what study of Torah is. It's reciting the words and it's contemplating the concepts. If you do those two things, it draws down that divine energy, that divine influence. Now continues on the Chava. There are many, many levels to this hashbah, to this influence and this energy. Like all other influences and energies that exist. These different levels are divided according to the division of the levels of speaking the words and contemplating the concepts. According to what his divine wisdom saw would be appropriate. On one level, one portion, if you will, of speaking the words of Torah, it'll draw down one level of hashpah, of Hashem's influence and energy. In a different level, different part, madriga. It's a different madriga. The same as with the concepts. However, there's no part of Torah at all, regardless of what level, regardless of whether it's speaking the words or contemplating the concepts, but there's no part of Torah study that does not have an effect, that does not draw down to some degree this divine energy and divine force of Hashem. If you follow the prescribed conditions. So that's coming up. This is a simple point. The loftier the understanding, one will receive a higher level of energy, a higher level of connection as a result of that higher level of study. You cannot equate the level of one who understands just the simple words and someone who understands their intention. Nor can you equate someone who understands the very superficial level and one who delves deep, very deep into it. Nor can you equate someone who delves a little bit to someone who delves very deeply. So this is a fascinating idea, very fascinating idea. The Ramchal is introducing us to the idea that being engaged in Torah study has a unique spiritual power to it, that it connects a person to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it draws down a very special spiritual force, a divine force, a hashpa'ah from Hashem to the person. And what the Ramchal goes on to say is that that's both in terms of reading the words and in terms of understanding the concepts, and the level of the connection and the energy that's drawn down will be relative to the level of study. And the deeper one thinks into something, the greater, the loftier, the more powerful the effect will be. Okay, let's continue. It is from Hashem's kindness. Hashem in His kindness allowed that every little bit of Torah study, even the most superficial, the most basic, will draw down some level of hashpah. Such that anyone who contemplates Torah will benefit from that great hashpah that is tied to that contemplation. Someone who doesn't come to any degree of thought, all he does is recite the words. Even he will receive a certain degree of this hashpah, of this energy. And the result is that the vast majority of the Jewish people have some share in this connection through Torah study, some more and some less. Because every iota, every little bit, every level brings down and connects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a certain level. This, by the way, is one of the sources for the idea that reading the psukim alone, just reading the words of the Torah itself, has a kedusha, has a power to it, even without any understanding at all. But that is specific to the Chumash, the 5 books of Moshe, which is the word of Hashem itself, which is intrinsically kadosh. Other Sfarim, the purpose of other Sfarim are not the word of God itself, their commentary, their explanation. Those, if you don't understand them, then you're not benefiting, you're not really studying Torah at that point. if you're not understanding those words. Okay, let's continue. Fascinating idea. In addition to the different levels of reward which is paid for someone who does his effort to study Torah, and each person according to his level, there's a whole nother dimension to this. There are levels and the different distinctions in terms of what a person needs, what is needed, to perfect the bria, to perfect the creation. Until the point that there's not even a single part of the Torah that through it there isn't some completion, some perfection, some correction that is made somewhere in God's creation. So this is another very, very deep concept that the Ramchal is telling us, and that's the idea of tikkun olam, of perfecting the world. And the Ramchal is explaining to us that Torah study is one of the ways through which we are able to perfect the world. And every little bit of Torah study on its level and its type has the power to perfect a corresponding part of the world. Someone who wants to serve his creator fully, he needs to exert himself over Torah, to toil over Torah, all of its parts to his ability. In order that he should be able to tap into that power to correct and to perfect all the different parts of Hashem's creation. And with this concept, Chazal, our sages, teach us, fascinating explanation of this Gemara. There's a famous Gemara. It appears in Maseches Kedushin and in Maseches Avodah Zarah. And the Gemara says a person should divide up his day, his Torah study day. He should divide up, a third should be studying Psukim, Mikra, studying the Chumash and the Tanakh. A third of his day should be studying Mishnah, and a third of his day should be studying Gemara. What's the concept there, says the Ramchal? A person should make sure to cover all parts of Torah. Because when we cover all parts of Torah, then, and only then, are we able to perfect all the different parts of the world. B'chalal, including this idea, Kol Chalakei HaTorah Sheichalik B'hem Zmano, that you should divide up all the different parts of the Torah to be studied each in its own time, until you grab hold of all of them, and you don't leave a single one behind. However, the amount to which you toil in each of them, that should be measured according to the person, and to everything that happens to that person. And I have already discussed this in a separate essay. Take a look there. So that's a fascinating little point that he's tossing in here, which he's not really explaining because he just references a different essay. But the Ramchal writes, this is not a one-size-fits-all. Even though the Gemara makes it sound that way. The Gemara makes it sound like every single person across the board should spend a third of his day in Psukim, a third of his day Mishnah, a third of his day Gemara. The Ramchal says no. It depends on the individual. It depends on the individual according to his abilities and according to his life, what's going on in his life, what's relevant to him, and what he's capable of. So that is a fascinating thought to think about when we think about how we want to kind of divide up our time and make the most of our time as far as Torah study is concerned. There is a well-known concept that I'll just toss in here because it's very relevant to what he just mentioned. I believe it's a Tosos right there in the Gemara, Kiddushin or Avodah Zarah, or both, who says that Talmud Bavli, the Gemara, the Babylonian Talmud, is a fulfillment in of itself of a third psukim, a third Mishnah, and a third Gemara. Because Gemara really just means a deeper analysis, cross-analysis, if you will, of the Mishnayos. And Talmud Bavli has everything in it. It has psukim that are being analyzed. It has Mishnayos that are being compared, and it has the Gemara, the discussions themselves of comparing and understanding all these things. So I believe Tosas is under the understanding that one does not need to limit the amount of his study time of Talmud Bavli, of Gemara, to only a third of his total study time. He could allot more than a third of his time for that because it incorporates both Mishnah and Mikra. Okay, continues the Ramchal. The Talmud Hineheim. The conditions. He referenced this a whole bunch of times as we were going along, that there are conditions to study. So what are those conditions? The conditions that need to come along with Torah study are as follows. Hayira, the Talmud Atzmo, the Tikkun HaMaaseh B'chol Eis. Reverence for the study itself and constant rectification of one's deeds. So that's pretty powerful. Let's digest that for a moment. He's going to explain it more deeply. Two things, two conditions. Hayireh b'Talmud Atzmo, a reverence and awe for the study itself, and correcting one's deeds at all times. Okay, I think we're all starting to develop our theories as to what exactly the Ramchal means by that. But I think we should forge ahead and see it with our own eyes, see how the Ramchal explains this, because I believe he's going to embellish on this. V'zeh, this is, Kihinei, behold, kol kocha shel haTorah, eino el b'ma shekosher v'toli zbarach as hashpa'aso hayakara ba. The strength of the Torah is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu binds himself and makes himself dependent, and his hashpa, his influence, his precious influence, dependent on it. Such that through speaking the Torah, the haskala, and contemplating the Torah, simashech hashpa hagadolai. This hashpa, this energy, if you will, this divine influence is drawn. Without this, without the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem himself, bound himself to the Torah, if not for that, then Torah would be like any other wisdom, any other discipline. It'd be like any of the sciences. O Sifrei Chachmos v'Haskala b'chol shar muskalos hametzius hativi l'mineihem she'ein b'mel yedias einahu. It would be nothing more than knowledge of that concept, knowledge of that topic. Ve'ein megim imenu his atzmus yakar umal klal b'nefesh hakorei, and there would not be any strengthening or excellence or loftiness at all in the soul of the reader. Hamadaber v'hamaskil, who speaks and who contemplates. There'd be no correction to the world. If not for the fact that Hashem went out of his way to link himself, this is a very powerful concept if we will digest it a little bit. Hashem made himself, bound himself to the Torah, to those words, to those concepts. If not for that, says the Ramchal, the Torah would be like any other knowledge, any other book of knowledge, and it would not accomplish anything. You would learn information, but it would have no spiritual consequence. It would not correct the world. It would not perfect the world in any way. It wouldn't bring down any divine energy, any divine spirit. this influence, this energy is something godly. It is of the highest order of influences that come from God down to this world. Since that is so, a person should have a tremendous awe and a trepidation when he toils, when he exerts himself in this matter, in Torah study. He is literally approaching God. And he is involved in drawing God's light, his awesome light, down to the world. Really, truthfully, if a person would truly understand what he's doing when he studies Torah, he should be embarrassed. He should be ashamed of his lowly human state. And he should be trembling from God's awesomeness. He should have tremendous joy for his good portion that he merited. But the joy should be with the trepidation. They should go together. Included in this would be that a person should not be lightheaded, shouldn't when engaged in Torah study, someone shouldn't be silly and lightheaded. He shouldn't conduct himself in any way that conveys a form of disgrace. Not in its words and not in its books. There should be an appreciation before whom he is exerting himself, before whom he is toiling. If he does this, then his study will be what it is befitting to be. And it will draw through it this power, and it will be strengthened the godliness, and there will be an illumination and a completion, a correction to the entire world. Okay, so that's a pretty tall order. Now, to have the full impact of Torah, a person has to study Torah with an appreciation of what it is, an appreciation that this is that God himself has been bound to this Torah, and to have a certain awe, but together with that awe and trepidation, a joy for having such an opportunity. But if this condition is lacking, then the light of the Torah will not come as a result of that study. His words will be like any other human words. His reading will be like reading a letter. His thoughts, like contemplating any other matters of the world. On the other hand, it could even be considered a source of guilt. He's approaching something so holy with no reverence. And he's acting with a lightheadedness and silliness in front of his creator. While he's literally speaking in front of him, and while he's involved in Hashem's own holiness. According to the level of his awe, the shir hakavod, and the measure of the honor and his care that he gives, so will be the level of the preciousness of his study and the level of the hashpah that it draws down. So this is really, really amazing if we'll think deeply into it. The Ramchal is saying that not only will the effect of Torah be dependent on the depth by which one studies, which was what he mentioned earlier, there's the level of simply reciting the words. Then there's the level of understanding them with the words. Then there's the level of understanding the intention of the words. Then there's the superficial, surface level intention. Then there's the deeper layers of understanding, and deeper and deeper and deeper. But in addition to that, there's a condition that one approaches Torah with an appreciation of what Torah is. And this too, the Ramchal says, is not an all or nothing, which is amazing. It depends on the level of one's reverence. The greater degree that one has an appreciation, has an awe for the Torah, the more powerful his Torah study will be. The lesser to which a person appreciates it, the lesser to which a person approaches it with an awe and with a reverence, the less powerful it will be, the less of a benefit it will be to the world. And if, God forbid, a person will approach Torah with no reverence whatsoever, but will be joking and will make light of Torah, that could even be a source of sin. Could even take something that would otherwise be a most tremendous and awesome mitzvah and turn it around into something which could be an Derech, chas v'shalom. So that is a very, very powerful thing. And, I don't like to be negative, but when you think of the tremendous amount of Torah study that is going on today, and all the yeshivas and all the kollels across the country, and then you think how simultaneously we have we're living in such difficult times, it makes you wonder, what happened to all that light? What happened to all of that hashpah? What happened to all that power that the Torah is supposed to provide the world? And I think the simple answer is this right here, that the power of the Torah is only according to the level of its study, but not merely the level of its study in terms of delving into the depths of Torah, which we see today in many, many places, in the thousands of people delving to the depths of the Torah. It's not just that, but it's also with this condition of approaching the Torah with reverence. And that is a tremendously difficult thing. Tremendously difficult thing. Something we get used to. That's just the reality of it. It becomes, something we have svarim in our homes, and we're used to just coming to a shir, opening up a sefer, studying some Torah, reading some psukim, reading the parsha, and it's no big deal. That's our general impression. No big deal. But the truth is the absolute opposite. It's a very, very big deal. And perhaps if we would appreciate more how big of a deal it is, then we would be able to unlock much more of the power of the Torah and accomplish much more good. Okay. Let's do one more little bit. The Ramchal said that there were two conditions. So far, we only covered one condition. V'tanai hasheni, we're in paragraph number 6. V'tanai hasheni, the second condition, utikon ha'ma'aseh. That is correction of one's deeds. Someone wants to draw down the effects of Torah. He has to be befitting, he has to be prepared to receive that spiritual energy. If he impurifies himself with sins, he distances himself from his creator, he strays from after him, and he strays after the powers of impurity and evil. There's no question, it's certain that it'll be said to him, to the wicked, God says, who are you to be speaking my statutes? This is also in Chazan, our sages. Call Malamed the Talmud Shein Hagan, anyone who teaches a student who is not befitting, Kiluzurg Evan Lamakulis. It's like throwing a stone to the idol Markulis, which of course is not the real name of the idol, it's a derogatory name, Markulis. But be that as it may, that's a fascinating idea. Teaching Torah to a student who is not proper, not worthy, is like throwing a stone to an idol. Very, very strong words. Vini ish kazeh, a person like this, there's no question that the Torah will have no effect at all, no positive effect at all. So this is the second condition. This one I think perhaps is a little bit easier for us. But we have to be interested. We have to be interested in the right way, in knowing the right way, and living the right way, pursuing the right way. If our interests are in pursuing evil, pursuing impurity, pursuing our desires and sin, then we can study Torah all we like. But if it is merely a study and not a way of life, then the study itself will not have that awesome power that it is supposed to have. Okay, so let's hold it here, and then we will continue finishing off the chapter next week in Yirtzeh Hashem. And yeah, we'll try to be finishing up this Sefer relatively soon. We'll see how things go. Okay, I wish you all a wonderful night. Thank you so much.